Imagine walking in silence along a path that seems safe, only to suddenly realize the ground beneath your feet is not solid at all, but a trap disguised as a road. This is how many live their spiritual journey, confident in routine, certain of their own strength, until they discover, often too late, that they have already fallen into a nearly invisible snare. Watchman Nee reminds us that danger is not always where our eyes can see it. Sometimes it hides within us, in the subtlest movements of the soul. Have you ever asked yourself why? Despite praying, serving, and believing with all your might, your heart remains heavy and restless. There is a secret prison that few dare to mention, one that keeps countless souls paralyzed, unable to move forward while convinced they are advancing. It is not the obvious sins or loud failures. It is a hidden chain that drains the inner life, making us confuse activity with true spirituality. Watchman Nee would call this the enemy's refined deception, a territory where the believer imagines growth, but is only walking in circles. It is like running tirelessly on a treadmill, exhausted, sweating, giving everything, yet never moving an inch closer to the finish line. And the more effort invested, the deeper the entrapment becomes within the illusion of progress. Is it not terrifying to think that many may live for years in this way, serving, preaching, organizing, yet never tasting the genuine depth of Christ? Could it be that the greatest obstacle is not something external, but our own reliance on the flesh, our hidden confidence in ourselves? This is the veil most difficult to tear away, for it often wears the mask of zeal and devotion. Here lies the urgency of Watchman Nee's message. There comes a moment when the soul must be exposed, stripped bare, and confronted with its own inadequacy, so that the spirit may finally be set free under God's full authority. Few ever discover this secret because it demands the deepest surrender, the surrender of the inner self that still desires control, even over the spiritual life. Today in this video, I want to unveil this subtle deception and lead you to what almost no one recognizes along their journey. There is a hidden deception that does not roar like a lion, but whispers like a friend. Watchman Nee often warned that the greatest trap of the believer is not the open rebellion of sin, but the quiet confidence of the soul in its own ability. The flesh does not attack us with a visible sword. Instead, it seduces us with the illusion of strength, making us believe we are capable of managing the life of Christ by our own effort. This is the shackle most difficult to see, because it does not appear as darkness but often dresses itself in light. Imagine a man trying to row a boat across a stormy sea with nothing but fragile wooden oars in his hands. He battles fiercely, sweating, shouting, determined that one more push will bring him victory. But the waters grow higher, the winds grow louder, and in his desperation he does not notice that a far stronger vessel exists right beside him, ready to carry him safely if only he would surrender his own oars. How many of us strive like this, prisoners of our own determination, blind to the futility of human effort? The soul is clever. It knows how to disguise its independence as devotion, its pride as zeal, and its stubbornness as faithfulness. This is what makes the trap so deadly. It is not obvious rebellion, but subtle replacement. We substitute dependence on the Spirit with loyalty to our own discipline, thinking that to be active is to be fruitful. Watchman Nee reveals that this is not progress. It is spiritual exhaustion, a treadmill of activity that may impress others, but leaves the spirit impoverished. At this point, many will ask, but is not determination a good thing? Is it not a gift to work diligently for Christ? And here lies the tension. The flesh craves to serve God, but only on its own terms. It will pray, it will work, it will sacrifice, but only while remaining the center of control. It avoids weakness, it avoids surrender, it avoids that terrifying exposure that says, "Apart from Him, I can do nothing. The most refined form of the flesh is not rebellion, it is self-made spirituality. The tragedy is that one can live decades inside this illusion. Whole ministries can be built upon it. Songs can be sung, sermons can be preached, prayers can be spoken, and yet the spirit remains locked in silence, waiting for the moment the soul surrenders fully. This is the subtle chain, the trap of relying on self rather than on Christ. And Watchman Nee insists that until it is broken, we will never discover the depth of true spiritual life. There is perhaps nothing more dangerous than believing we are advancing when in truth we are standing still. Watchman Nee often described this as a mirage in the desert. The weary traveler, desperate for water, sees in the distance the reflection of a shining pool. With renewed strength he runs toward it, pours out everything to reach it, only to find sand beneath his fingers and despair in his heart. This is the illusion that ensnares countless believers, the belief that constant activity equals spiritual progress. How easily we decorate our lives with movement. We attend gatherings, join ministries, consume teaching after teaching, and even pride ourselves on the spiritual language we have acquired. There is always something happening around us, and so we assume something must be happening within us. But Watchman Nee reminds us that the Spirit of God is not measured by outward activity, but by inner reality. And it is possible to live surrounded by spiritual noise while the inner temple remains silent and cold. Think of a tree in the heart of winter. From afar it may look strong, its shape upright, its branches firm. Yet when the winds blow, one realizes that no sap is flowing through it, no hidden life pushing from within. It can stand tall, but it cannot bear fruit. In the same way, outward routines give the impression of life, but without the Spirit's flow, there is no true growth, only structure without substance. Why then are so many satisfied with this illusion? Because the flesh seeks reassurance. It desires a scoreboard to measure itself against, something visible to point at the number of prayers said, the hours of service counted, the recognition of others as proof of progress. But spiritual life is not measured in numbers or applause. It is measured in hiddenness, in unseen surrender, in whether Christ, not self, is the one truly filling the vessel. This realization is unsettling because it strips away every false security. It leaves us face to face with the raw question, have I truly grown in Christ, or have I only grown in activity? Watchman Nee would urge us not to ignore this question, for to awaken here is to be spared years of empty striving, but to remain asleep is to continue in circles, trapped within an illusion that blinds the eyes and hardens the heart. And it is precisely here that the Spirit begins, his deeper work breaking through the shell of the soul to reveal what has been hidden within. Every believer at some point must face the uncomfortable truth that the greatest hindrance to the Spirit is not the world outside, but the unbroken soul within. Watchman Nee speaks of the soul as a shell, strong and proud, clinging tightly to control. Within this shell, the human personality, the mind, the emotions, the will, demands to reign. It does not easily yield, and unless this outer shell is broken, the spirit remains imprisoned, unable to flow freely under the authority of God. Imagine a seed lying in the soil. Inside, it is the potential for life, roots, branches, fruit, shade. Yet so long as its shell remains intact, no life can emerge. The soil may be rich, the rain abundant, the sun fierce, yet the husk preserves its cold barrier. Only when the shell cracks open does the inner life burst forth. This is precisely the condition of the believer. The spirit dwells within, yet remains confined unless the soul is shattered. The breaking of the soul is never gentle. It is not polished or comfortable because it challenges the very throne of the self. Circumstances, trials, humiliations, all may serve as the hammer in God's hand. The believer may pray for spiritual power, but God answers with weakness. He may ask for growth, and God responds with loss. To the soul, this feels like contradiction, but in truth it is divine mercy. The shell is being cracked, so that the fragrance of Christ may escape at last. To understand this is to see suffering differently. Watchman Nee writes that suffering is not merely something to endure, but the tool God wields to release His life from within us. The Lord does not break us to destroy, but to liberate. Pain becomes the knife that cuts away self-dependence. Tears become the river that washes away illusions. Loss becomes the instrument that exposes our naked reliance on Him alone. The soul resists, but the spirit quietly rejoices. Here lies the paradox at the heart of the Christian journey. The very things from which we flee, weakness, failure, humiliation, are the very things God uses to set us free. This is not theory, it is living reality. Many can testify when they were stripped of every false strength, they touched a depth of Christ they had never known before. This is the breaking of the soul, and without it, the life of the spirit remains confined forever. When the outer shell is shattered, something extraordinary happens. What was once hidden and imprisoned suddenly begins to shine. Watchman Nee teaches us that the spirit, long confined by the dominance of the soul, is finally free to express the life of Christ. This release does not come through effort or striving, but through surrender and breaking. It is here, in the ashes of self-reliance, that something unspeakably beautiful begins, the unhindered flow of life. Picture a jar of the finest perfume, tightly sealed. The fragrance is precious, more valuable than gold, but as long as the jar remains unbroken, no one can experience its sweetness. The world may admire the jar's shape or design, but they cannot know its true worth until it shatters. So it is with us. The treasure is Christ within, but unless the vessel is broken, He remains hidden. Only when our soul yields and our strength collapses does the fragrance of His life begin to fill the air around us. This release transforms not only the believer himself, but also those who encounter him. Through a broken spirit flows patience, gentleness, wisdom, compassion, not human virtues polished by discipline, but Christ's very nature expressing Himself. Suddenly, what once required striving begins to flow effortlessly, like a river released from behind a dam. The Spirit is not produced by effort. He is revealed when the barriers of the soul are removed, and this change is undeniable. Those who touch such a believer do not simply admire his knowledge or his zeal, they sense Christ Himself. Something deeper than words takes place. A transmission of life. Watchman Nee explains that true ministry is not teaching, nor charisma, nor activity, but the flow of divine life from spirit to spirit. This cannot be faked, and it cannot be achieved by training. It comes only through the breaking that releases the spirit. But notice this paradox. While the release brings incredible richness, it also demands continual humility. The soul, even broken, seeks to rebuild its shell, to regain control. The believer must remain in the posture of dependence, remembering always that the treasure is not of himself, but of Christ within. The danger is not once and for all destroyed. It lurks, waiting to reassert the old independence. Thus, the truest work of life in the Spirit is not dramatic achievement, but ongoing surrender, moment by moment. If the release of the Spirit is the beginning of freedom, then the daily cross is the pathway that preserves it. Watchman Nee emphasizes that the Christian life is not about one dramatic moment of surrender, but about a continual death and resurrection woven into each day. The danger of rebuilding the old shell never disappears completely. It waits, subtle and patient, and only the cross, applied daily, willingly and humbly, keeps the soul in its place of brokenness. The cross is not merely a symbol of forgiveness for sins, it is the ongoing instrument of freedom from the dominion of the self-life. Imagine a vine, growing wild, curling around itself, twisting in endless tangles. Left unchecked, it cannot bear fruit. The gardener's pruning shears bring pain to the branch, yet that cut makes room for sunlight, air, and eventual fruitfulness. So too, the cross cuts into our habits of self-reliance, painful yet essential, removing what chokes the life of Christ within us. But this is not a path of despair, it is a path of liberation. For every cut of the cross allows new life to shine through. Each letting go of control is followed by a deeper release of His presence. Where we once fought in restless striving, we now find rest. Where we bore the heavy burden of performance, we now carry only His yoke, which is easy, and His burden, which is light. The cross reveals that life is found not in clutching, but in surrendering, and there is more. The daily cross transforms how we touch others. Instead of offering them fragments of our strong opinions, our clever strategies, or our fleshly zeal, we begin to offer them Christ Himself. Pain refines love. Weakness deepens patience. Brokenness enlarges compassion. People no longer encounter merely our personality. They encounter the fragrance of the crucified and risen Lord, shining through a vessel that has been emptied of pride. This is the mystery at the center of Watchman Nee's message. The trap of the soul is escaped only through the continual cross, and the goal of all breaking, all surrender, all release is not an emptiness, but a fullness. The fullness of Christ, living His life in us. Few discover this secret because it costs everything. But for those who do, life is no longer a treadmill of anxious striving. It becomes a stream of divine flow, carrying not only themselves but many others toward the depths of God. There comes a moment when the heart can no longer escape the truth it has heard. We are either living in the illusion of the soul, trapped in endless striving, or we are surrendering daily to the breaking that allows Christ to truly live through us. The hidden trap has been exposed, the veil lifted, and the fragrance of freedom beckons each one of us to step into a reality where self no longer rules, but where the Spirit flows unhindered. This is not theory, not mere teaching. It is life or death, emptiness or fullness, illusion or reality. And now that you have seen it, you cannot unsee it. The question you carry from this moment forward is not whether the trap exists, but whether you will allow the cross to shatter it within you. If these words stirred something deep in you, then do not let it remain locked in silence. Leave your reflection in the comments. Let this truth echo by sharing it with others, and stay connected by subscribing, so that together we can continue uncovering the mysteries of Christ's life. Every time you act, you take part in spreading this fragrance further. Remember this, the greatest tragedy is not to fall into the trap, but to see it and choose to walk away unchanged. So tell me, will you let go, and let the fragrance of His life finally be released through you?